Boy, oh boy, do you follow that photographer skit as something else, isn't it? George is a person that really loves organization, and as you can see, the show is put together really well. How about a hand for him? That is, it's put together till now. You see, what happened is, if you look at your program, I'm supposed to be doing military stories, and I'm not. So George, it's not that he's unhappy, but he is ticked. So I thought I'd tell a story about George and maybe make him happy. Jerry, is he smiling back there? Yeah. George tells everybody and told me that he has never been involved in drugs when he was a kid or any time. But I happen to know that George was on drugs. He overdosed on drugs at one time. He overdosed on iron. And he told me himself he couldn't stop pointing north. Now that's real tough in an east-west bathroom, let me tell you. But I will tell one military story for him. The Air Force developed this cannon that shoots chickens at airline windshields to make sure that they would have a collision, that the windshield would withstand the force of it. Well, the British heard about that, and they decided they'd order one of the cannons, so they did. But they wrote back and said, boy, we can't understand, our specifics on our windshields must be terrible, because we shoot the chickens at the windshield and it goes right through. Could you tell us what's wrong with our windshields? Well, the Air Force looked things over and decided, so they sent a letter back to the British that had 5 simple words. First, thaw out the chicken. Our economy is in kind of a tough shape. It's to the point now that if the bank talks about bad checks, we don't know if they're talking about ours or theirs. And how about the morals of the country? Sometimes you see things kind of slipping a little bit. This newlywed couple went to the hotel. They wanted to rent the honeymoon suite. So they said to the clerk, is there a possibility we can get the honeymoon suite? And the clerk said, sure. How many adults? So you see, there's no way. Now we have health, weight loss, and all that kind of thing. This one lady, older lady at the health spa, was losing the most weight. And all the people around couldn't figure out why she was doing so well, so they asked her, how are you so good at losing weight and everything? She said, it's real simple. After 6 o'clock, I take out my teeth. Another lady, older lady, was having lunch at a cafeteria. And she happened to sit down next to this young girl who was smoking. Just offended her terribly. She said to the young girl, I would rather commit adultery than smoke. The young girl said, so would I, but there's not enough time in the lunch break. Just the other day, I went in the closet, way back in the closet, I had a coat, reached in there, and I hadn't been in there like in about 10 years. And I found a ticket in there for a pair of shoes from the shoemaker. Well, I wouldn't even wondered if the shoemaker was still around. So I went down to the shoemaker, by God, he was still there. I took the ticket in, he took the ticket, he went in the back, he came out, he said, yep, the shoes are still there, they'll be ready Thursday. This IRS agent walked up to the priest. He says, you have a parishioner in your church. I think his name is Carl Joss. Sorry, Carl, I'm going to tell the story. The IRS agent says that Carl wrote on his income tax that he donated $10,000 to the church. Did he? The priest said, he will. Guys, do you ever notice how our wives seem to put up, so our wives and girlfriends or gals, whatever, put up with anything we seem to do? Sometimes it's inconsiderate, what have you. Here's a couple of good examples. Guy says to his girlfriend, before I marry you, I love you so much, I'd like to give you something that you really want. What would it be? She said, well, probably a mink. He said, okay, on one condition. What's that? You keep the cage clean. This couple were having a fight, and for 3 days they didn't talk to each other. Finally, the husband says, honey, where's my shirt? She says, now you want to talk to me? After 3 days we haven't been talking and now you come along and talk to me? She says, what are you talking about? He says, didn't you realize we haven't talked to each other for 3 days? He says, oh, I just thought we were getting along. The wife was coming home from work, hard day at work, and the husband calls on the phone and says, when you come home, you want to get into the hot tub with me? Before she could answer, he says, because if you don't, I've got to add some water to the tub. Yeah, I know. He's in a lot of trouble. Of course, the old standby about the couple who are having trouble, they go to the marriage counselor. The counselor says, you know, you two have to learn more about each other. You got to communicate. For example, what kind of flower does your wife love? He says, I think it's Pillsbury. Maybe it's gold medal. I don't know for sure. A fellow man walks into the kitchen. His wife is cooking in there. He says, you want to go out, girl? The wife says, you know, you haven't asked me for a date since way back before we were married. It's just so sweet of you. He says, hey, I'm talking to the dog. There's another one in trouble. Okay, this one has to do with some American tourists who were traveling in Holland. They were taking a tour of a goat cheese factory. And when they got done, as they were walking out, they saw this pasture and lots of goats out there, and they asked what that was all about, and the tour guide said, well, you know, after the goats can no longer produce, we send them out to pasture. They'll live the rest of their lives. What do you Americans do with your old goats? Don't get ahead of me on this. They have to live in Florida and go on bus trips.